It's great to see you all, and lots to learn today. So I'll get mine out of the way so we can hear the other people's information. So it's about our stories, and I want to just put you into a situation so that you might understand just how important your story is. Imagine that you're at the airport and you waiting for your plane to take off and so on. And there's this constant chirp over the intercom. Announcements are being made, people are being called. And imagine if this message comes over the intercom and it says, Amy Collins, please report to the ticket counter. There's a problem with your ticket. Now, who will go to the ticket counter? You won't if your name isn't Amy Collins. The only person who will go will be Amy Collins. And the reason for that is that the only person who will actually hear that in a meaningful way is Amy Collins. Her name is being called and no one else's name is being called. If there are several Amy Collinses, they'll all go because they don't know which Amy Collins it is. But those are the people who will go when summoned. Now, we need to understand that when we are wanting to share our business or our products with anybody, we have to make sure that that person's name is being called. Because if that person's name is not being called, that person is not likely to respond. And so I'm going to give you some examples. Before I give you the examples, I'm going to give you a structure that is recommended by a guy called Pat Quinn. He's Canadian, and he earns his living by teaching people to tell stories because he says only a good storyteller will be a good marketer. And I regret to tell you that if you think you're not a marketer, but you're just a sharer, you're playing with words. We are, in fact, marketers. It's network marketing. We need to know how to market well. And there's just one quote that I love of his, and that is that he says, ask yourself, what am I doing here in the context of Neolife? And the answer should be this: I have a story to tell, and that story changes lives. You have to get that idea into your head that you have a story to tell, and that story will change lives. And so he talks about a 2.5-minute story, and that it has 3 parts, a 60-second part, then a 30-second part, and then another 60-second part. And in the first 60 seconds, you talk about what your life was like before, and I'll elaborate in a little while, but what was my life like before? The 30-second part is then something happened. And then the next 60-second part is now my life is much better. So it's a before, a pivot, he calls it, this something magical that happened, and now my life is much better. And the object of your story is that somebody hears their name, figuratively, being called in that story. So if I am going to tell you a story about cleaning motorbikes, for example, and you have zero interest in motorbikes, then I'm not calling your name. You will not be interested in the story. I have to find out what your name is so that I can tell a story that calls your name and you will be interested in hearing more from me. So let me give you a couple of examples that I have used, do use, depending on the circumstances. For example, I am now old, as you can see, but I have some young friends who have got small children. And one of them in particular used to say to me, I don't know what to do about Emma because she is constantly sick. I have to send her to the creche because I'm working, and I cannot keep her healthy. She catches every bug that goes around. So she's just throwing this out at me. She's venting. She doesn't know anything about what I can offer her. And so I need to call her name. And her name in my story goes something like this. You know, it's a long time ago, but I remember exactly how you feel, because my kids were the sorts of kids who caught everything that went around. And in fact, we seemed to camp out at the doctors. Not only the doctors, but the specialists and the kinesiologists and the iridologists and the homeopaths and everything I could think of, because I couldn't solve the problem. And then somebody introduced me to some whole food vitamins. And I thought, well, I've tried absolutely everything else. I don't really believe in vitamins, but I'm going to try these because I'm at the end of my tether. And I started giving my kids these particular vitamins, and like a miracle, things turned around. No more trips to the doctor, etc., etc. So I have called her name because I have addressed the problem that she has presented to me. And unless she's an idiot, which she wasn't, she says, well, what were those products? Can you tell me more? Where can I get them? That kind of question. And I can then go on to say, I can get them for you. I really recommend you try them. I can't promise that they'll work for you, but if they worked for you as they worked for me, it'll turn your life around. Well, she tried them and she's a convert. So I was listening in her conversation, and that's the other thing. The other part of telling your story is learning to listen to other people's stories and finding a point of connection where you can address their story, their name directly with something that you can offer. Now, let's take another example. Let's say someone is talking to me about being concerned about income. They've lost their job, or they are on half pay, or whatever, something along those lines. I can, in all honesty say, yeah, I really understand how you're feeling, because my circumstances were different, but I had something very similar that happened to me, because I gave up my professional career in order to be a stay-at-home mom. And so I no longer had money of my own, and I was totally dependent on my husband's income. And I hated that feeling of being totally dependent on his money when I had been earning my own in the past. And I needed to find some way to generate money that I could call my own and spend in the way that I wished to spend it. And then somebody told me, and I can elaborate a little bit about that if they were interested, somebody told me about a way in which I could earn some money working from home and working at times that would allow me to look after my kids as I wished. And I started exploring that, and it seemed to tick all the boxes I needed, and I started doing that. And initially it was just pocket money because that's what I was aiming at. But it soon became a proper income, and it can continue to grow indefinitely as long as I do the work. So here I was hearing that person's pain. I was able to say, I understand it. I had the same kind of feelings. I found a solution. Maybe you'd like to hear it. And so it's very, very important, and I'm going to say it again, I have said it already, that we listen to hear the name of that person. Not their name, I'm Joanne, but the name that they are crying out for attention with. And you hear that, and you have a story on hand that you can respond with. Now, obviously, if you're just starting out, you start out with zero story. You don't have a product story, and you don't have a business story. But the very first thing you must do, it's absolutely foundational, is to use a product. If you don't use a product, then you have no way of developing a story. So find the product you're starting with. If it's Super 10, get a Super 10 product. I've got lots of Super 10 products, which I can address depending on what someone else has said. And then start finding a business product so that you've got another story where you can draw on people's concerns about earning a living. You can say, I'm just starting out. I haven't earned a living yet, but I certainly know people who have earned much more than a living. They're actually earning a fortune. And I have joined that journey with them. So please, people, make it your business. This is one of your homeworks. Make it your business to have at least one story ready before this week is over. And then make it your business to make a second story to address the business aspect, product story, business story. Because without those stories, you cannot call the names that need to be called. And you will fall between the cracks. Nobody will hear their name being called and nobody will listen to you. So I hope that's helpful. And I'm going to over and out and hand you back to Nola.